Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at Floyd Farland, Citizen of the Future, by a very young Chris Ware. This is Chris Ware's first published work as far as collected. These strips were originally printed in the Daily Texan, which was the newspaper for at the University of Texas, where Chris Ware went to as an undergrad. They appeared for about a year, and then this came out in 1987 from Eclipse Comics. It's even back then, Chris Ware had this a nice design sense, very different than it is now. You would never even guess this is Chris Ware, but it's a totally different style, but definitely well designed, especially compared to comics back in '87. Not many comics look like this or read like this. So there's an interesting story behind Floyd Farland where apparently the story goes that Chris Ware over the past few decades has been systematically getting as many of these copies as he can of this and destroying them. In fact, he'll even trade you a sketch for Floyd Farland just so he can destroy it. He wants to basically erase the fact that this ever came out. He doesn't want anyone to ever see it. I happened to buy it in 1987, before anyone knew who Chris Ware was, and I liked it. It was definitely very interesting for the time. For independent comics in the late 80s, this was some really interesting, weird stuff. Of course, a few years later, Chris Ware started doing his real good stuff, and then it was just like amazing. Which within just a few years of here, Chris Ware was almost like fully formed. But this is a totally different style, and this is it's kind of this dystopian future we see in this, but kind of dumb, a dopey dystopian future, and definitely played for laughs. So we start off here in this world. The whole populace is brainwashed by commercials and media, and basically to be a good citizen, you're a good consumer. And basically in this world, the majority of people are in the underground because most people don't like the system. Except for Floyd Farland, this guy. He's totally a dopey, content, tool. He accepts everything the government tells him, even if it contradicts himself. And he's happy in his ignorance. As you can see, just this totally weird style, almost like some comic strip style that's in the papers. Just a very weirdly abstract style. So Floyd Farland is at a restaurant waiting for his friend. He ordered a tube of soup. It's this soup you just suck with a straw. And his friend Bob is late. And Bob shows up and he says, "Listen, Floyd, I'm in trouble with the police." And all Floyd can say is, "My soup is congealed." He says, "Listen, I have to deliver a message to the underground and I'm not going to make it. You're going to have to do it. I know I can trust you." And Floyd says, "What? You're a rebel?" "Of course, isn't everyone? The world's gone to hell. Taxation, poverty, media brainwashing." And Floyd says, "I can't do this." And then the cops yelling with a megaphone, "Come out and we'll shoot you now." And Bob says, "Good luck, Floyd. I know you can." And before he can finish his sentence, his head just evaporates into blood and bone. And Floyd just takes a sip of his soup. He's pretty unfazed by it. And then he says, check, please. And the waiter comes over and he says, oh, I think there's something wrong with the check. You charged me for my friend's coffee. We see Bob is just, his corpse is there, bloody all over the table. Nobody really seems to care. They're just arguing about this check. And he's like, I've always had separate checks with this guy, Bob. We've been coming here for years. Why do I have to pay for his coffee? And so the guy starts yelling, police, this rebel freak is causing trouble. And the police instantly come in and take him away to the station. Let me adjust the camera a little. So at the police station, they're kind of interrogating him in this way by showing him, looking into his mind. And what they're finding out is that Floyd Farland is the farthest thing from a rebel. He's almost like the perfect citizen in this fascist world. He trusts the media. All of his opinions are current. All contradictions are current. All racial prejudices are current. And it says, remember, black people suck. And there's one of those anti-symbols through a black man's face. So subject is 100% washout. No subversive thought patterns. But when they look at his pockets, they find that message to the underground that Bob gave him. And so their leader, who kind of looks like Mr. X, he says, this man is a dangerous underground spy. Apparently the rebels have discovered a way to mask their thought patterns. We're going to have to proceed with Operation Mind Rape. So they do this new procedure. I imagine it's going to rape his mind. It doesn't sound good. And here we see young Chris Ware definitely, experimenting with some interesting stuff. When they press the button, it just says snap, and it slowly closes up on his pupil. And then the pupil, then it pulls out, and it's Floyd. And all I can say is, but I've always liked cheese sandwiches. So it's almost like he's so vacuous, the mind rape doesn't work. So they throw him in jail, and he's totally happy there. The guards are abusing him. Every time he does something they don't like, they just clonk him on the head. They're constantly doing it. And he's constantly just being like, oh, I hate to be a bother. I hope this isn't I'm not being troublesome. And we see a hand checking off guests to be executed. And it's getting closer to Floyd Farland's name. And then they check it off. So now the guards are joking with him. They're like, oh yeah, you're going to be released today into a jar. I guess they're just going to pressurize him, turn him into liquid. That's how they kill prisoners here. So all of a sudden, this little saw makes a circle in the floor like something from a Bugs Bunny cartoon. And this hippie-looking dude named Joe pops out. And he says, your name Farland? And Floyd is annoyed. He's like, how'd you get in here? And he's like, dude, mellow out. Special Forces Subversive Rescue Division. He says, you're a rebel? Get out. They'll think I know you. And he's like, hold on, I'm here to help you. And so he tells him that in the time that he's been incarcerated, that he's become a hero to the rebellion. You've penetrated government security, wiped out primo interrogation equipment, and literally turned the government upside down. He's got the higher ups sweating. So he's a total hero of the movement, even though he's totally not a rebel at all. And so he's arguing with him. He doesn't want to go. And he even starts yelling. He's like, guards, I'm being hassled by a rebel spy. And Joe's just like, you're really weird. He knocks him out with some like mace knockout gas and brings him down into the little hole and rescues him. So he takes him to the headquarters of the rebellion. And they put him up out on stage. And all the rebellion are there waiting for his words of their hero. And they have a little speech for him. And he stops reading it. He just says, oh, I get it. You guys think I'm a rebel agent. That's funny. And Joe's like, whatever. I think it's his superior. He says, like, what the hell is he doing? And Floyd tells the crowd, you got the wrong guy. I think you made a mistake. You might as well all go home. And Joe asks him, he says, you're not an agent, are you? And he says, oh, that note that was in my pocket? Just a mistake. And Joe says, you better run, dude. So everyone's all like, traitor, traitor, get him. And he does this very abstract thing to show the panic on Floyd Farland's face. Then already back then, Chris Ware was really good at the fake ads. This looks like some authentic 50s ad. Is this enough, Daddy? And this is basically an ad exhorting children to pay income tax. If you want to be a good citizen, even little kids should pay income tax. So now we're introduced to Frank Masterson. He's working late at the office. In this world, just because he keeps his blinds open, and people can look in, he's considered a nonconformist. People think it's weird. It's like, how come he doesn't put his blinds down? And anyone can see him. So this guy comes in named Bill. And we can quickly find out that these guys hate each other's guts. And Bill's kind of a psycho. And Frank's just like, why don't you just go home, Bill? Leave me alone. And Bill's his superior, and he's kind of threatening him. He's like, oh, you shouldn't talk like that. You wouldn't want to be home, out on the street without a job, eating dog food on the sidewalk. And then the project that he's been working on for days, he just writes slut on it just to fuck him up. Just a fucking weird guy. Of course, he mentions why don't you opaque the windows? That's weird. So Frank leaves the office, and he shows up at his girlfriend's house. And she's a little worried about him, because she says that guy Bill called. It turns out she's Bill's wife. And it's almost like this open thing where Bill totally knows they're dating behind his back, and nobody seems to care. And she doesn't seem to care. She basically just hangs out with Frank all the time, her boyfriend. They get in an argument. Some guy calls him up, and it just says cheese sandwich. And so it turns out it's these two guards who have been monitoring Frank. This is how inept everyone is in the future. Even though it's this fascist state, almost everyone who works for it's pretty fucking stupid. So they were ordering cheese sandwiches, but accidentally called Frank instead of calling the restaurant. So that's why it just said cheese sandwich, and then they hung up. So they're talking about the government's bragging about this new process they have that will that'll take care of Floyd. Because they're so terrified of Floyd, they really think he's organizing this army of thought rebels and thought warriors to seize control of the marketplace and establish a dictatorship. They're totally clueless about where Floyd's coming from. So they're going to get 3 people who are kind of semi-subversive themselves because they figure they can infiltrate Floyd's mind techniques, which they think he has, which he doesn't. We see another fake ad. I like how all these ads are endorsed by Ed Granston. I wouldn't use any other. We constantly see these posters with his face on it. So now Frank and his girlfriend are hanging out. And he gets a call from Bill. Bill calls him. And he says, hey, we got to move the deadline up. You got to come back to the office right now. And so, right then, a pizza guy shows up. It's Floyd Farland. He's like, hey, did anybody order a pizza? And they're like, no. Sorry about my pausing. The type is so tiny in this. I guess my eyes are getting old. So these two goons who work for the government. So the first guy that they picked to infiltrate Floyd Farland's circle, which doesn't exist, is that guy Bob from page 2. And they're like, oh, we couldn't contact Bob because we blew his head off last week at that diner. So the two guys are like, this won't look very good. Well, I guess that leaves us only one choice, right? Yep. Okay, I'll see you around. And they each blow each other's head off. They commit suicide because they don't want to get in trouble. Yeah, even then, even though this is so not as good as what Chris Ware became, you can definitely see it's like his weird sense of humor. I mean, it's really not developed yet. This isn't nearly as funny as the stuff that, he rose to prominence with. But for a freshman at college, this is damn good shit. It's definitely unique. So at the office, of course, Bill and Frank start bickering again. And Bill is bragging about his new thing he's developing for the government, the Past Master. And it'll rewrite all relevant history banks. And Frank doesn't like this. He's like, this project was being designed to refine data, not destroy it. And Bill is just like, Frank, you got to get with the program. So now we see that, the guy who's in charge of all the goons, he's kind of like the CIA head of this world. And now they go to the second person to infiltrate Floyd Farland, is Joe. And Joe works at the pizza place. He got Floyd the job. He's kind of off the grid a little, this Joe guy. So they throw him in jail, and they can't penetrate his mind defenses just because he doesn't know what they're talking about. So they accuse people of this crazy stuff because they're idiots. And then when the person doesn't know what they're talking about, they're like, oh my God, he's got these mental defenses that are just impeding every time we try to peek in their brain. It's not working. They must have these great defenses. It's like, no, they don't know what you're talking about because you made it up. So this government's really dumb. So now Frank, I keep calling him that. Sorry, Floyd is hanging out with Frank's girlfriend. He was delivering the pizza, and I guess she invites him in to have coffee, and he's telling her his whole story. And she's just like, oh my God, that's crazy. Tells him about how he got put in prison. And in his mind, they were just nice to him in prison. He was like, oh, the guards were very nice. Always joking around with me. With a bunch of cut-ups. They tell Joe, now we cut away to Joe in prison, and they tell him his plan. This guy who looks like Mr. X tells him the plan. And Joe just laughs. He's just like, you guys are fucking morons. So now we're back with Floyd and the girlfriend, Frank's girlfriend. So yeah, he's just retelling the whole story of how he's escaped from how Joe got him out of prison. But he does add the fact that when those rebels were howling for his blood at the rally, Joe was the one who saved him and kind of pulled him away. I guess he felt a little guilty about getting him into the situation in the first place. And then she says, if everyone thinks you're a subversive agent, how'd you get a job at a pizza parlor? And he's like, oh, Joe got it for me. And he made me change my name to Frank Masterson, which by some crazy coincidence is her boyfriend's name. Now this Mr. X guy is talking to his superior, and the superior's like, dude, I don't know if this is going to work out. He's like, trust me, I got this. He's basically questioning his idiocy. He's like, what about this Joe guy? His entire memory's been destroyed and replaced by a fiction manufactured by Farland himself. Just because Joe believes in what actually happened, his assumption is that, oh no, this is the story, and he must have been brainwiped and a fiction put inside his head that contradicts my stupid story that I made up. So this kind of reminds me of Brazil, just how idiotic the bureaucracy is. So Floyd is once again talking to Frank's girlfriend, and Bill shows up. And Bill, I don't know if he's just drunk or even beyond that, but this is crazy. I think he's having a seizure. Is that what this is supposed to represent, this crazy abstraction of his face? And they're like, oh my God, what's the matter with Bill? And Floyd says, oh, I better be going. I should leave you two guys alone. But are you sure your boyfriend's going to be all right? And she says, this isn't my boyfriend, this is my husband. So Floyd's confused. But of course, Floyd is just such an idiot. He instantly forgets about it and is just humming along while he's driving home in his pizza truck. And he goes home, listens to the radio, eats a cheese sandwich. Just like doesn't care about all this crazy intrigue. So these two goons realize that there's two Frank Mastersons living in this building. So I don't know if they're implying that all this time Floyd Farland lives in the same apartment as Frank Masterson, because it seems like he drives away. So I guess they do live in the same apartment complex. So first they go to Floyd's apartment, and they don't like his answer, so they clonk him on the head and haul him in. Then they go to Frank's apartment, or I don't know, is this the girlfriend's apartment? I assume it's Frank's apartment because they're looking for Frank Masterson. Bill's there, getting over his little seizure, and Frank just gets home. So they take everyone down to the clink, even the girlfriend. So they're all in a prison cell. Floyd Farland, of course, is just being like Pollyanna, like, hey guys, this isn't so bad. And Frank is like, they're going to fucking kill us, you moron. That's what happens to people in jail. Yeah, I don't think anyone's ever drawn in this art style. This is very odd. So the Mr. X guy is threatening them. And he basically tells Bill, because Bill got hauled down there just because he was in the apartment. And like, Bill, you are our best worker, one of our finest workers. You're going to finish that past master historical reorganization device right now for us. And then you're going to use it on yourself and these guys. Basically, you're going to work on the device that's going to kill you, that's going to erase you. So he does. He's such a weirdo. He's like, oh yeah, I can't wait to finish the project. And then we go back to the jail cell. And Floyd Farland is still being all optimistic and like, oh, I'm sure we'll be out of here. Toot sweet. And the girlfriend's kind of dim too. She's just like, oh, I'm sure Bill is, changing the program so he's going to save us all. It really looks like Bill is losing his mind. He kind of shows Bill his irises or pupils. They started multiplying to show how nuts he is. He's just really addled. So the device is done, the past master, and then he's going to demonstrate it on, I believe, Floyd. And when he hits the button, this is what we see, this like spew of weird collage, 50s ad art, consumer-driven stuff. And then we see Floyd kind of coming out of it. And I think basically Floyd is such a vacuous, empty vessel anyway, it doesn't really do anything to him. That's the impression I'm getting, because it's kind of a cryptic ending. He says, "What happened? Was that supposed to happen? Get off the screen. Did you hear me? Get that off the screen. Find another file. Find my file." So I think what they're implying is that Floyd Farland is on every TV screen in this world, somehow. And then it reiterates the thing from the beginning. The time is the future. Technology and overpopulation have gripped the genitalia of society. And there's an evil force. Manipulation of the media has enslaved man. Except for Floyd Farland. But now Floyd Farland isn't just Floyd Farland. He's become this, like, he's everywhere. And it ends with Floyd is happy. His story is all that is left. And he already knows the ending. I'm not sure if I understand that ending, but it's definitely interesting. That's why I've kept this for, 40 years now? 35 years? I love this. They have an about the author from Chris's mom. And she tells an interesting anecdote about how he just loved drawing so much, even when he was like 2. And she said the first time she ever saw him draw, he was in his crib. And he called to his mom excitedly and said, look, picture. And at the end of the crib, there was a finger painting on the headboard. She can't even recall what it was, but she does remember the medium. And she's glad that he moved on to ink in comic books. And then a nice little thing from Chris Ware, just talking about the history of where these appeared, and he says that he redrew, rewrote, and reconstituted most of the strips from the Daily Texan for this little graphic novel. And I like this. There's an ad for other Eclipse books. And they even get Ed Cranston, noted comics historian. I wouldn't use any other. So that's that. A very rare comic, and rarer as the years go on, since Chris Ware supposedly is systematically destroying copies of this whenever he can. But I'm not going to get rid of mine. It's got historical value. And I don't quite understand his attitude of wanting to destroy his past works. Sure, it's not as good. It's his early works. It's not that great. But it's important to see this kind of stuff. He's a big fan of comics. I'm sure if George Harriman said, I don't want anyone to see my Family Upstairs strips where Crazy and Ignatz first appeared, because they're not as good. I'm not as proud of them. I mean, I'm pretty sure he'd be bummed. A lot of comics historians would be bummed. It's nice to see this early stuff that's crude. It's also inspiring to artists. Like, can you imagine you discover Chris Ware when he was fully formed in the 90s? You look at that stuff and you're like, oh man, why even bother? This guy's a genius. I'm never going to be able to draw that well. But remember, he started like this. You never know. So I think artists should never censor their stuff. We get it. You were young. There's nothing to be ashamed of. And just historically, it's very important for other artists and for comics historians. And to be honest, I don't think it's anything to be embarrassed of. Sure, it's not as great as you became because you became the world's greatest cartoonist. But compared to anyone else, it's a pretty damn interesting 80s comic. And it's definitely unique and pretty funny, too. So there you have it. Floyd Farland, The Citizen of the Future by Chris Ware. And I hope you enjoyed it. I usually say, oh, I hope you can find this, but I don't think you will be able to find it. Actually, I think they're on eBay, but they're very expensive. They're like over $100. And they probably won't even be there for another 10 years because they're slowly getting destroyed. So I'll see you next time here at the Herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Thanks for watching.